lot of people say, I want to be more confident. How can I be more confident? In order to grow your confidence, you have to be willing to go to the places where you have none and stay there and do the work. Confidence is not something you kind of aim for. It's a side effect of being willing to be vulnerable for a while and be the beginner and put the work in. And then over time, it's a side effect of doing that work.
When people come and see you in your clinic, it's feel like number one by a mile.
It comes up everywhere, doesn't it? Whenever there's a problem, because it's a survival response. It's your stress response kicking off saying, all is not well, be alert. We often talk in trauma work about that being like your stress response being like a spring. And when too much weight is placed on it, it's hard to make it go back fully.
Yeah. Your journey, has become meteoric.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I didn't even know I wanted children until I sort of suddenly did. And I was really focused on career and things like that. But there's a fundamental change that happens in a person, I think, when they become a parent. You're suddenly not the most important person in your life. And so it shifts into this sense of responsibility, which, like you say, changes how you want to be in the world and the kind of person you want to be.
You have to. A beautiful morning, which is just about to get even better, because it doesn't have to be bad to be better. It can be stunning to get scintillating, and that is where we're heading right now. Vassos, over to you.
Our next guest is a clinical psychologist and best-selling author with just the 8 million online followers. Her latest book, Open When, is out now and already #1. So please welcome the tip-top TikTok doc, who is yours truly, Julie Smith.
Julie Smith, good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Listen to that from the team. She's a clinical psychologist. She's got 8 million followers. She's really nice.
Oh, I wish my kids would do that at home when I got home.
Never going to happen. And that's why we come here, isn't it, Vassos?
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you, Julie?
I'm really good.
How's your health?
Really good, thank you. Yeah, I'm on the other side of, I had a sort of a big summer with breast cancer and surgery and all that kind of stuff. But touch wood, I am on the other side of it and doing really well. So,
yeah, and we'll talk about fear and you rewriting or adding to the chapter of fear, the original chapter, because it's one thing to think about it. It's another thing to prepare for it, should it ever happen. And then when it happens, you learn a whole different, it's an exponential curve. Yeah. So here's the thing, here's a question for you, right? Why, Dr. Julie, right? Why is it sometimes when we are hugged, spontaneously we burst into tears?
Oh, that's a big one, because a lot of people are kind of holding lots of emotion and tension, and they're trying not to. You're doing the sort of the swan thing, aren't you? You're kind of paddling under the surface, but you're trying to just keep everything together. And so the minute someone shows you some kindness or compassion, whoosh, it all comes forth, doesn't it? So I think that's a big one for a lot of people. It
is a big one, and it's no matter what we think we can do with the mental, and what we say to the outside world, it's all in the body, isn't it? We've got to let it out. It's so important.
Yeah, and you can feel it, can't you? If you kind of move around, or if you exercise, or if you have to be still for a long period of time, you feel the influence that has on how you feel.
Your book, you describe it as a toolbox. It is a brilliant toolbox, and I love the format. So the format is you pick a topic, you have big decisions to make, you're worried that your friends aren't your friends anymore, you're worried about being a people pleaser. I love the chapter on because there's the power of now by Eckhart Tolle, but there's the power of no by Dr. Julie Smith. It's how to say no. How important is the word no?
Oh, hugely. I mean, well, all of those different scenarios, I deliberately picked nothing clinical. It's all the normal human problems that we all face at some point. And actually all of those chapters came to me in one morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. And I was thinking of all the things that either I'd been through or my clients have been through or people I know have been through that just come up time and time again. But they're all things that leave you feeling completely confused about what to do next, probably carrying emotion that you don't know what to do with, and just struggling to kind of find a way through. And I know that with my first book, I had these lovely compliments where people were saying, I'm finding it so helpful that I'm taking it around with me everywhere in case I have a little crisis. And that was lovely to hear, but it was also, I just kept thinking, I didn't really write it for that. It wasn't for those moments of crisis. It was a set of tools that you can learn and practice to improve your resilience over time, for when things happen in the future. Yeah. But if you're in the middle of it right now, the last thing you need is for someone to say, oh, you probably should have started mindfulness 6 months ago, and then you'd be all right now. You don't need that. You need someone to kind of look you in the eye and say, right, I'm with you. I know a way through. Follow me. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So it's very much more in the moment when you're struggling. I wanted something that I could, give to my kids when they leave home, or give to my family who live across the world for when I can't be there, to kind of give them a little pep talk. Or...
Yeah, you pretty much covered everything. It's got to be said. I mean, there's 3, 4 or 5 things I think that most of us suffer from, are confronted by, are wary of, are not prepared enough for. But you get up to 20 and 30 in this. It's like a medicine cabinet in a way, isn't it? And it is like you say. It's like pulling the ripcord. It's sort of the emergency moments. In your lovely TikTok world, 4.8 million followers and counting. Congratulations. You use lots of physical and visible props, and you have your confidence balloon and your vulnerability balloon, and you have a little connection between the two. And you talk about confidence and vulnerability in the book as well. Just speak to that for a moment, if you don't mind.
So the whole idea around confidence is that a lot of people say, I want to be more confident. How can I be more confident? And the tricky part of that is that in order to grow your confidence, you have to be willing to go to the places where you have none and stay there and do the work until, confidence is not something you kind of aim for. It's a side effect of being willing to be vulnerable for a while and be the beginner and put the work in. And then over time, it's a side effect of doing that work. So, if post-pandemic, I was only confident in my own home, then in order to expand that sort of comfort zone, I'd have to first step onto my doorstep. And I've actually done this work with people before who've been agoraphobic, and you spend a couple of weeks on the doorstep just looking out and getting used to that. And then your body, what we call habituates, so your stress response goes down when you've done it a few times. So then you can go a little bit further and a little bit further, and confidence grows with that. But you kind of have to set your goal on a thing, a situation, something you want to master first, follow that, and then confidence will come later.
Confidence creeps. True confidence is a creep, isn't it? It's not like a hack or a trick. True confidence creeps. And I talked earlier on in the show about confidence and vulnerability. And for me, ease is like the super confidence, in as much as if you get into a situation that you're prepared for and you've practiced enough for, and your book should be just called Skills, man, because it's full of skills that we can all learn, are accessible, and that we can just mimic for the moments that we might need them, and hopefully get better at them later and master them later. But the more confident you become at something, and you can speak the language, then I think with that comes an ease. Because if you're temporarily confident and then you go into a situation and then somebody says something you didn't prepare for, your confidence literally runs for the hills.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's an ease behind that, you then gather yourself, you take a couple of breaths, and your confidence creeps back in again. And that's true confidence, isn't it? And we were talking last week on the show about, it's January, changes, this, that, and the other. Great to make a grand statement, but it's the small, boring changes that are easy to keep up consistently that end up really delivering the sort of solid goal, but that's way down the road, isn't it? And once you realise that, it's a very undramatic realisation, but it's a much more accessible, doable thing. But it just doesn't seem that shiny on day one.
And then when it comes to doing something like this, right? So you've been doing this show for years and years and years.
100 years.
And, for me, it's my second time. There's been a long sort of period of time in between. So it's still very new and novel. So the stress response goes up. And the way that I deal with that kind of thing, or if I'm doing sort of TV or something that I don't do that often, then the way that I have that sort of ease that you're talking about is to make a commitment to myself that if those worst case scenarios happened, fall over, humiliate myself, say the wrong thing, I will have my own back. I won't kick myself when I'm down. I will treat myself as if I'm someone that I'm coaching and I want the best for, rather than hammering myself verbally or that kind of thing. So.
I love it. And you say, if you want to do something, you want to master it, just keep doing it, get better at it, become more at ease with it. It becomes more at ease with you. It looks you straight in the eye. Then one day you realise you're not fearful of looking it straight in the eye. Yeah. Now, if people doom scroll, right, that is doing the same thing every single day, but you don't get better at it. It's not making you feel better, because you could say, well, that's a bit like cognitive therapy. Expose myself to it enough, it won't affect me anymore. But it has the opposite effect. So when does repetitive action not work, and how do you know the difference and whether to turn left or right?
Yeah, so I guess when repetitive action does work is when you're facing something that's difficult and you're facing a fear, and so the stress response comes down. But it sometimes something like scrolling is actually an avoidance of the thing that you know would be good for you but scares you. So it's actually a safety behaviour that then becomes addictive, because you get all those little dopamine hits from it.
Right, and because you are not doing anything about your low self-esteem, for example, no judgment at all, you are reconfirming the fact that you are justified in having low self-esteem because all these people think terrible things about you.
Yeah, and it just goes round and round in a cycle, because doing the other thing is really, really difficult.
So again, it's like there are the Lennon and McCartneys of the psychological world, aren't there? And then there are the Brothers Grimm. So the vulnerability and confidence, they are brilliant partners, hand in hand, if you know how to get them to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And then you get resentment and gratitude. And resentment is gratitude having a bad day, and gratitude is resentment having a great day. How do you bridge the chasm between those two?
Well, I always see gratitude as a sort of antidote to resentment.
Right.
So lots of resentment. I think there's a bit of a quote in the book where I talk about how resentment isn't a sign that someone should be doing better for you. It's a sign that you should be doing better for yourself.
Yeah.
That there's something you need to work on, and often it's a sign that you've probably said yes a lot more than when you needed to say no. You've kind of not had the boundaries that you've needed to have, that kind of thing. And so for resentment, you can kind of use gratitude as a way of just shifting the trajectory of your attention enough to look at, okay, there's always something to feel grateful for in the worst of situations. I used that even through, my cancer diagnosis in the summer. That was really helpful to just shift that attention and that focus from something that could have been focused on, catastrophe or resentment at the fact that I was even doing that and having to go through it. It really helped to kind of shift things along. But there's always also that kind of behaviour element. So, what are you doing in order to prevent resentment from growing in the future, like putting in boundaries
and things like that. So let's talk about your own fear that you experienced. So you'd learnt about fear. You became a clinical psychologist. You still see patients now dealing with fear. You've thought about it to the extent that you wrote about it, and then you experienced the worst fear of all firsthand.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying it changed your opinion about fear, because I don't know if it did or not, but it certainly gave you some other things to write about. Can you tell us what you learned from it? Did you get anything wrong in your sort of forecasting of what fear might feel like? Just speak to that if you don't mind.
I think I kind of knew what sort of fear was like at a lower level, but there's something about coming face to face with your own mortality that it's just, that sort of wash of adrenaline that goes through your body, and
you feel ironically more alive.
Yes, yeah, and I just happened to be, when I got diagnosed, I was about a week before I handed the manuscript for Open When in to my editor, and I just sort of. I wanted to get the thing off my desk. I needed to just finish reading it through, editing, and get it gone so that I could focus on treatment and things like that. And I just happened to be reading the chapter on fear. And it's not so much that my what I knew about fear changed, but the approach I needed was much more forceful and strong, and often in these kind of things I've taken quite a gentle approach, because I think lots of people lend themselves to that, but I've also worked with the military in the past. So I did we had a small ward at the MOD when we were in Afghanistan, so I did lots of that work, which needed a kind of different approach. Those people lend themselves to something a bit more forceful, a bit more like a coach, like a sports coach. So, I read the chapter and I thought, this isn't what I need. I'm going to rewrite it for myself.
Interesting.
So I hit delete and I rewrote it there and then. And it was probably the quickest chapter I wrote.
Did it just come pouring out?
It just came pouring out, yeah. And then I kept coming back to it, and it helped every single time. And it was very much, okay, you're here. You can't change the fact that fear is here, but you can use it to your advantage. So get to work. It's very much... let's do this.
Call to arms.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when I received my diagnosis in the corner of a car park in Los Angeles, and I was completely set free by the positive diagnosis of skin cancer. Okay. And it was like, okay, let's go. And before that, I was having a terrible time. But in a way, it was a relief and a release, because at least you can move on to what next.
Yeah, because then you can put a foot forward, can't you?
Totally.
Which feels fundamentally different to
some sense of control back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what I found benefit in. There's nothing worse than the moments of feeling like a rabbit in headlights, just waiting. As soon as I felt like I could take action, I did it, and then you get a sense of agency from that.
You talk, I mean, everything in the book the book is fantastic. Dr. Judy Smith, Open When. It's just a brilliant book. I love the format. I didn't finish off talking about the format. Judy specifies a particular scenario or a particular situation or something we all sort of suffer from at the hands of every day, and then you write a letter to us at the beginning of every fear or whatever it may be. And then each chapter follows the same format, real-time tools. And then you go into sort of a list of different aspects of whatever it is that particular chapter deals with, and then you have the takeaways. It's so manageable as a book. Thank you for the format. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I wanted who reads a book cover to cover these days? You want to be able to dip in, get what you need, and get back out again.
Yeah. So. And it's all in here. I mean, if you were to write the next sort of incarnation of this book, you would have another 30 subjects to. I bet you're writing them down all the time, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess the scenarios could keep going, couldn't they? But in some ways, it's the second incarnation to the first book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before, which was the skills to help you, that you can practice and build up your resilience for the future. Whereas this is when you're in the eye of the storm and you need the right words, here they are. Because it's really difficult to find them by yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's super cool. It's super cool. Churchill said, hell is other people. The Harvard Life 7-generational study says heaven is other people. We need other people. And in your book, you talk about when friends are not friends, when people around you become passive-aggressive. The passive-aggressive chapter I was fascinated by. So as well as suffering from passive aggression, what about when we find ourselves being passive-aggressive ourselves? How can we notice that in ourselves? Why is it happening? What can we do about it?
Yeah, I think it's partly, reading up about the different signs of it, because I think a lot of us do it without even realising. And that's why also in that chapter where it's, when you kind of start to realise that your friends might not have your best interests at heart, what do you do and how do you notice that? It was really difficult to write about because the signs are so subtle and they don't always mean the same thing. That it might be that, when you're delivering good news to your friends, you realise they don't really want to hear it and you get shut down. Or when you're delivering bad news and you're trying to kind of seek support or connection and that gets shut down with, oh, well, I've had something worse, or those sorts of things. Sometimes that might be that the other person's just having a difficult time too. So I talk about not making kind of big impulsive decisions about closing friendships down just because that person hasn't been perfect, but also looking at what you're doing in the situation to contribute to the relationship as well. Because often we will do those things when we're in a difficult situation. So it's just being aware of, how you are in yourself and whether you're, if you're or if you have a negative feeling towards someone who is trying to connect with you, one of your friends, is just being brave enough, and I say brave enough because it's not easy to look at yourself, brave enough to kind of look inward and say, what's going on here? Why do I feel so resentful towards that person?
I think there is a complementary book to this one, which is all from the perpetrator's side, because we all suffer from these things, and we all, mostly all of us, are at least responsible for some of these things with regards to other people. And when you talk about passive aggression, spotting it in people and what they do, that I think speaks massively to a change in direction of travel from them to you. So it's suddenly from them wanting to be your friend for whatever reason, and usually if it ends up with passive aggression, there could be something that was transactional that you didn't realise but they were more than aware of, and then them projecting onto you all their problems, which before that you were covertly their answer to or their involuntary assist with. Do you think so?
Yeah, and I think often we have this tendency to hold on to old friendships because they're old. But over the years, when things change, values change, we kind of start to discover that it's not good for us or it's not healthy for us, it can be damaging, but we're holding on to it because, well, I've known them since school, or that kind of thing.
And just to avoid the awkward meeting where we need to break up with them or whatever we need to do with that. And you speak to all that as well, don't you?
And to kind of say, don't make impulsive decisions, get to a point where you've thought about this so much and so clearly that you you know what you're doing and why, and so when it feels painful or difficult, you have that kind of thing in your mind that I know it's still the right thing.
Values, when your values change. That's interesting, isn't it? Some of us have very fortunate situations forced upon us, like Parenthood, which make us better people, whether we want to be better or not, which give us, because I've heard you on various other podcasts being amazing, with amazing hosts, but clearly hosts that don't have children, and they go, how do I keep on this? When do I know? Because I'm suffering burnout. Because kids, or because you're consumed with your work. By the way, you know, nothing wrong with not having children. Some people want children, can't have children. But it's funny, isn't it, how certain values are foisted upon us? Just tell us a bit about your own journey where that's concerned, because your journey, has become meteoric.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I didn't even know I wanted children until I sort of suddenly did, and I was really focused on career and things like that, but there's a fundamental change that happens in a person, I think, when they become a parent. You're suddenly not the most important person in your life, and so it shifts into this sense of responsibility, which, like you say, changes how you want to be in the world and the kind of person you want to be.
You have to go to bed earlier. Because they're going to wake up fully charged. They're going to have 100% green on their heads at 5 a.m. and they're even 98%. They're fully charged. It's not fair.
How old are your youngest ones?
We got twins at 6.
Oh,
got five kids, 2 grandchildren. But it's all great. It's all good in the hood. So often when people are getting down on themselves, they can't help then overthinking more and more about themselves. Now, if you've got kids, you have this automatic solution when you wake up. But of course, it does help, doesn't it, to transfer any focus from yourself to other things, other people, other purposes. Because again, then you realise you become a help and not a hindrance to other people, which makes you feel better about yourself. And so there are different ways of doing that, making those connections. How would you recommend people go about that? Purpose, if you like.
I think the more time you spend, I think I talk about it in the book, about how the inner world is a bit like a sauna. So there are benefits to being there, but only if you don't stay too long.
Yeah.
So that's fine to kind of do that work, but then make sure you turn outwards and you look at, okay, who do I want to, the value stuff isn't what you want to happen to you, it's who do you want to be, what kind of person do you want to be, how do you want to show up for other people and what matters, and so sort of turning outwards and focusing on how am I going to contribute, what am I going to have left behind, not only like in your whole life but today, what am I going to do that, you know, how am I going to leave the people that I connect with feeling 10 feet tall, that kind of thing. So,
and it's funny, isn't it? Because in order to do that, then the second, third, or fourth, or the next realization, or any substantial realization, is, I need fuel to do that. I don't have any fuel to do that because I've not been respecting myself. And then you automatically have to do things that benefit you so you can help others.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I love the automation of it all.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, to get up here and come here every day, we know we have to go to bed early. Otherwise, it's going to be like, you know, trudging through mud on a daily basis. And at the moment, we get to the third or fourth hour, which is effectively what we are now, and we feel like we've just begun again. You know, Taylor Swift has got nothing on this show with her 3.5 hour gigs every now and again in the stadium to a standing ovation.
It lifts everybody up, because I'm often kind of doing the school run, you know, eyes half closed and struggling to start the day, and that buoyancy that you guys have is just contagious.
You can fake it for a bit, but you can't fake it forever.
No.
It's got to be this infinite well of gold that you secretly get to draw from every morning. And people say, how do you do that? I say, well, it'd be harder for me not to do it than do it. We were talking yesterday, weren't we, about things. The show is hard work because you've got to up early in the morning, but it's not difficult. Some things are easier but more difficult, and then you're not meant to do those things. Sorry, Vas, over to you.
Well, I love how you communicate really kind of difficult ideas with a sort of ease and lightness. There's one thing right at the start, right? You dedicate the book to 3 people, to Sienna, Luke and Leon, and you say, my wish is that you never need this book, but I wrote it just in case. Now, I strongly suspect that all 3 will need the book to some extent or another.
Well, they have got Mum.
Yeah.
There is that.
Well, I mean, some things just happen to all of us. You know, when you're, anxious, you have to give a presentation, and that sort of. What do you think, from your years of kind of clinical practice, what do you think is the chapter that most people will go, oh yeah, I really need that?
Oh my goodness. I think all of them have a certain relevancy, but Probably the fear one. That no matter what the situation is, this specific scenario is just one of those emotions that if you have your relationship with it in the right place and you get your head space in the sort of facing in the right direction, then it doesn't have to hold you back. And I think that's something that that's probably why the videos and things like that have gone so wild, is because we haven't really been taught that. And whatever it is about our culture today, people aren't getting that message, and so when they feel fear, they're often shutting down, pulling back, withdrawing, thinking that it's something that's wrong with them, and it's none of those things. And I feel fear coming in here this morning. I think, oh my gosh, I'm on Virgin Radio. But I had a conversation with my husband just before. He said, what a cool experience, and that just reframed that sort of mindset for coming in. This is an exciting thing, and it's something that I can look back on and say, I did that once. And so when I think of it like that, I haven't changed anything about the scenario. There's still a stress response there, but I'm on the front foot when I walk in, and I'm determined to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you zoom out a little bit, it's so helpful. And if you can zoom out a lot, it's really, really, really helpful. That's about being aware, being present, being in the moment, all that kind of stuff that we know so well nowadays.
Yeah.
And if you can zoom out a little bit, it's then a joy, it's a privilege, it's ultimately a potential pleasure to get to feel that nervous, because when do you get to feel that nervous in life? It's a context around what is normal, and it's the tinsel, it's the velvet curtain. It's like, come on, let's go. This is great, And if I felt so bad about this, I'd be throwing up, and I'd phone up or send a text saying, I can't do this, so I must want to do it really. So let's just embrace it.
Yeah, and it's often about how you look at it, isn't it? If you recognise that your stress response is helping you, it's a sign that your body is ready to bring its A game. Yeah. So you can say, wow, I'm up for this, and I'm doing it, as opposed to, I've got that horrible, palpitations. That means I can't do it.
Breathe.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. And the fear is, we talked about this last week. Fear is always followed, not always, usually followed by the word of. It's fear of something, fear of this, fear of that. And what we have to learn to do, or what it's helpful to learn to do, is to drop the of and just focus on the fear is the same source. Yeah. We just apply different flavors to it in order to compartmentalize it and shut it down brick by brick. But there's always going to be another wall. Yeah. So what it is about conquering fear, full stop. And fear is freedom, and freedom is the foundation of all happiness. Yeah. When people, it's funny, I was going to ask a very similar question to Vassos. When people come and see you in your clinic, are there is fear like number one by a mile, do you think?
Yeah, I guess it infiltrates into all different situations, and probably so. The work I was doing around sort of military trauma and stuff like that. Obviously, that is, fear is a huge part of PTSD and stuff like that. So, but then also, I guess all the other stuff as well. It comes up everywhere, doesn't it? Whenever there's a problem, because it's a survival response. It's your stress response kicking off, saying all is not well, be alert, and that can be really useful. But when we often talk in trauma work about that being like your stress response being like a spring, and when too much weight is placed on it, it's hard to make it go back fully. And so when it's sort of overstretched, then it can become really problematic, and you can get poorly. But
now, you talk a lot about the fact that you are an introvert, and I believe you. I talk about the fact I'm an introvert, and he doesn't believe me. Can you tell him why we are both introverts and why he doesn't understand it? Because you're public facing, you've got 5 million followers, 8 million followers in all on social media. I have whatever we've got on the radio, but you can still be an introvert. As a clinical psychologist, can you explain that to him, please?
So, I guess I have the skills to communicate because of my job,
we did that.
Because of my job. I don't know how I can put myself in the same
Julie and
category as you.
myself over here.
But I think the difference is, so today I'm doing this, and I've got a couple of podcasts to do, and I'll go home and I will be absolutely rinsed, and I will probably need a couple of days of sort of quiet, alone time, working at my desk again, to recover. And I think that's the difference, is the need for recover. So I guess an extrovert might feel really pumped by the whole kind of interaction stuff and get more energy from it, whereas I would feel
100%. You're pointing at me. 100%. I'm an extrovert. I make no bones about it. All I'm saying is, so is Chris.
Now, only an extrovert would say that. By the way, you used to claim the opposite. You said, no, it's the other way around. That's the first time you've ever said, I make no bones about it.
Of course I'm an extrovert.
Because suddenly we happen to have a clinical psychologist here.
No, I've never said I'm an introvert. All
I
I've
think
said
you
is
might have done.
you're an extrovert.
Yeah.
You are definitely...
Can you tell straight away? Are you like some kind of guru?
No.
Can you sense
and I
things?
think people who suggest that are probably telling porcupines.
Or projection. Could it be projection, perhaps?
Possibly, yeah. But I guess, you know yourself, don't you? And whether you feel kind of depleted by, if you go to a big party and there's lots of people, lots of conversations going on, whether
Which
that
he
feels
loves.
depleting.
Love all that.
Yeah. Whereas
I can't stand it.
Yeah. So and I kind of, even if you can enjoy something or a party or whatever it is, it just means that you get that depletion and you need that recovery time afterwards, which is fine. If you treat the system with respect, you can use it to your advantage.
Just so you know, I got 2 copies of your book here, which you can see, and one the team has marked up, and one I have marked up, and they are full of notes. So we could literally keep you here for the next 20 shows. We are out of time, Dr. Julie Smith. What anything you'd like to say? Please follow Dr. Julie at Dr. Julie on Instagram, on TikTok. An hour ago, Elon Musk, China said they're in talks with Elon Musk and selling TikTok to him. Do you have an opinion on that?
No opinion.
I think in the same hour he's since denied it because it's not a great negotiation tactic to say he wants it.
So he wants to buy TikTok and Liverpool.
Does he want to buy Liverpool?
He wants to buy, according to his dad, he wants to buy Liverpool.
Got some spare change.
Yeah, he and Dad haven't spoken for, I don't think, forever. But so where do you want to go from here? Because you do have 8 million followers now. The guy who owns, Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company.
Right.
So the same family still own Patagonia, that have always owned Patagonia, and they've never advertised. And they say the reason they've never advertised is because they don't want forced growth, because forced growth will cause inauthenticity and a factory mentality. And so they want to grow because they think, because Patagonia is all about the outdoors, they're a very nature-loving family, they've always loved the outdoors, they test their own clothing, that's how it came about, because the clothing wasn't good enough and it was used to rip, and they've got lifetime guarantees on anything they say. So I have no involvement with them at all. I'm just a big fan of their philosophy. And they say that if you allow yourself or ally yourself with natural growth, you will never not be able to cope. You will never suffer burnout. Yeah. Where are you with that on your personal journey?
Yeah, I think because I have, 3 children and I, I don't live in London, I live out in the sticks and things like that. There are lots of things that I say no to because of wanting to be present as a parent and that kind of thing. And that's allowed the whole thing to stay fairly manageable.
Yeah.
And, we haven't taken on a big team or anything like that.
Yeah.
We've just said, okay, what we can do, we will do. And everything outside of that has to be a no. So that's helped it to be manageable.
So hard no's are more than
boundaries.
Prevalent in your household.
Yeah.
I think you're amazing. Can we have Dr. Julie Smith, please, if you don't mind? #1 best-selling author, 1 million copies, open when? Come on! Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You can breathe now.